I think it's probably fairly safe to say that most of us in the room have some problem. Is there someone in the room who doesn't have any problem whatsoever? Let's just, okay, probably then most of you are at least somewhat interested in the topic. I would even be willing to wager that those of you taking on the retreat, that's part of the reason why you're here. That something inside you is looking for solutions to the problems in your life. And by a great grace, you figured out that probably coming here, you might be able to catch some new insight, see a new way of looking that would help you to deal with the problems that life is giving you. So already we can say one thing about your problems, and that is they're a gift. Your problems are a gift that brought you to be with a group of very beautiful people dedicated like you to inner research and seeking for solutions in a way that is not exactly the ordinary way. And what are the ordinary ways of seeking solutions to problems? Or, as the title of my talk said, how do we see our problems? I've been doing some research recently on medical studies of stress management. And my goal in doing that is to compare the current medical thought on stress management with integral yoga. And it's actually very exciting research because it has become clear to me that integral yoga is probably the best, the deepest, and the most complete system of stress management ever devised, because it takes into account every aspect of the individual and treats every problem on every level with an appropriate type of response, with an appropriate type of intervention, you could say. And in the literature on stress management, they say that we look at our problems in a very specific way. We view something coming toward us by taking a photograph, you could say. And certainly there is the event outside, and certainly there is like a film inside, a neutral receptor. But what arrives on the film is very much influenced by the makeup of our camera, of our particular camera. That is to say, how have you got all the settings on your camera? How much light are you letting in will determine whether you see this future as very bright or very dark, right? And what kind of filters do you have on it? They may determine, for example, your lens may determine whether you're looking at a very close detail or seeing a big picture. And a lens may change the color or even distort the image, so that what finally comes out may be certainly reality or a reflection of reality, but it is very, very much affected by our particular mode of seeing things. In other words, how we see a problem probably says more about me, myself, than it does about the external situation. And if you remember nothing from this talk, I would hope you would retain that one thing, that how you see problems says more about you than it does about the exterior world. And that's why you're here at a retreat, those of you taking the retreat, and that's why you're here at the ashram, those of you visiting the ashram, because somehow you got it that the mode of blame and projection onto the outside world isn't it, and that really what we have the power to change seems to be ourselves. And that would seem to be, for a person seriously interested in unchanging happiness, the best place to begin. So the literature on stress management says that there's a normal, healthy response to looking at a problem. You assess the risk. In other words, is this going to hurt, my career, let's say, or is it going to affect my physical health or my life itself, right? Then you assess your abilities to cope. What are the different strategies? What are the different means I have at my disposal to cope with this problem? And then you come up with a plan of what you're going to do. And that may include many things. It may include reasoning with the person. If a person is the cause for a problem, it may include climbing a tree if you're trying to get away from a dangerous animal. It may include active physical intervention, such as digging a hole, building a house, whatever it is. And it may include circumventing, going around. And a healthy person has many, many different coping mechanisms and a fairly clear assessment of the risk and of their ability to cope. Now, the problem arises when there is some kind of cognitive dissonance, is what they call it, or let's see, what's the term? Dysfunctional cognitive structure. I just love those phrases. The dysfunctional cognitive structure looks like this. Let's just say that when you were a child, let's take the instance of a young man. When he was a child, he was bitten by a dog, and suddenly his whole view of dogs changed. Instead of being something he wanted to play with, they were very fearful. And he started to generalize that circumstance into the whole world of dogs. That is to say, all dogs bite. And then he took it one step further and personalized it. All dogs want to bite me, right? So instead of there being big dogs, small dogs, frisky dogs, fuzzy dogs, soft dogs, now there are biting dogs, and not just biting dogs, but biting dogs that bite me. So this is indeed a dysfunctional cognitive structure. That is to say, whenever this person sees a dog, they might have the inappropriate reaction. That's what else goes with a dysfunctional cognitive structure. Namely, you start to run away from dogs no matter what is going on, whether it's appropriate or inappropriate, whether the dog is big or small, etc. And the other problem with that is that your process of reasoning is very often unconscious or only semi-conscious. In other words, that appears so true to you that you don't even stop to question whether or not all dogs are out to bite you. So in the literature on stress management, they'd say, let us hypothesize that an external stressor triggers the dysfunctional cognitive structure. Now, in integral yoga terms, we would probably say, let's say this guy sees a dog, right? So let's say this guy sees a dog. And let's just say that he's fallen deeply in love with a young woman, and she's invited him home to see her family. He comes to the door is open, and he's greeted by her family's little teeny-weeny chihuahua. And what does he do? He runs away screaming. End of romance, right? Certainly not the result he would have wanted from that situation, due to the way he projected onto this poor, unfortunate dog. So you have to think about the consequences of our seeing the world in a completely skewed manner can sometimes be just the opposite of what we would hope for in a given situation. But to add another dimension to it, there's also the possibility that this poor young man might blame her. She didn't tell me she had a ferocious dog. They were trying to trick me. What did I ever do to deserve this kind of treatment? That they would sick their vicious guard dog on me the first moment. Her parents must hate me and not want to see their daughter get married, right? I mean, this is what the mind can tend to do. Now, in that instance, this is of course an exaggerated instance, but it's just an example. You can see how the way we personalize, the way we project, and the way we generalize our problems really says a lot about us and the coloring of our mind, and not so much about the semi-neutral phenomena outside ourselves that we perceive as problems. So, what do we want to do in this kind of a situation? My dear beloved brother monk, Swami Ramananda, did some very interesting work on how to get beyond how we see our problems. We tend to have 3 generalized reactions when we're viewing our problems through a not quite appropriate filter. And the first one is when we see a perceived threat to ourself and a generalized threat to ourself, we react with fear. The second one is when we see some kind of encroachment on our person or someone thwarting our desires, we tend to react with anger. And the third one is when we feel powerless to change the situation, we tend to react by getting depressed. So when we have a vision of the world as problematic, we tend to react with fear, anger, and depression. Those are very often our major modes of filtering in our problems and perceiving and determining our solutions. So those of you who are on retreat might want to take a little fearless moral inventory this week while you're sitting there watching your mind spinning around. You can ask yourself, am I reacting inwardly with fear? Am I reacting with anger? Am I reacting with depression? And try to get to know a little bit about the composition of your own mind. It can be a very, very useful exercise. It's wonderful when you cut off the external mode of expression, namely you're not talking, in order to resolve things happening to you, because what you're forced to do really is to look at who is in there interpreting what's going on around you. A wonderful opportunity. Meditation, daily meditation, can serve that same function for those of us who aren't lucky enough to be on the retreat. In other words, taking a few minutes a day to retreat from your normal interactions in life, close your eyes, and watch your own mind is a very, very great opportunity to take a mini retreat and see who's in there and how you are interpreting the problems in